Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast. I am your host, Michael Ford, joined by Jared. Jared, hey man, what's up?
Not much. I'm doing pretty good.
How's the life of a college freshman treating
It's all right. Workload's starting to increase, so a little stressful, but other than that, it's pretty great.
you? All right. We're also joined by Randy. Randy, what's it like on the uh in the land of crazy stories?
I mean, yeah, the stories never stop being crazy because we like even in weeks where we don't get a whole lot of news, sometimes we get like developments on stuff that's already popping, and it's a lot.
Yeah, Florida man is always out there. Florida man is always getting into trouble. But for the listeners, if this is your first episode, I apologize. We are still in our off season, but we are getting very close to the fifth season of the Racial Draft, where we change the complexion of the comic book universe one draft pick at a time. And before we get into our nerd news stories, I'd like to shout out to your favorite mermaid and mine, the Little Mermaid in the Disney. It appears that white people have lost their goddamn mind. And anyone want to say anything about that?
Um, Last I checked, as somebody, I don't know if folks are aware. I am a fan of mythology. I love reading folklore and legends and different fairy tales and stuff like that. But last I checked, uh, mermaids are not a thing that is exclusive to Europe. There are numerous cultures around the world that have their some version of a mermaid or something related to a mermaid, and you know there's people who literally are talking about like, oh, you're taking away our heritage and our culture, and it's like, I had no idea you were from Atlantis. I am so sorry. Like, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, as far as I mean, mermaids, they're just half people, half fish, right?
I mean, look, by all means, if you are offended that the fish half that she is like not native to your land, then like, okay, sure, fine. You're like, well, I thought her bottom half was supposed to be salmon. Like, I think that's unfair. I guess like I don't really get like they're not actual beings that exist. They
Mm.
exist in legends around the world, but they are just that. They are legends.
Yeah,
So
not to mention that like the specific Little Mermaid story, that would be the Disney version of the Little
mhm.
Mermaid story. D- Correct me if I'm wrong, but that movie came out in like the late 90s, right?
I believe it was like late 80s, early 90s. I'm not quite sure, but I do know that it was like 90s-ish. I will say that.
89.
You said
Yeah.
89?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
So
I was born in 91. So I'm like, I saw it when I was young, but it was like it hadn't just come out. So
okay. I mean, the reason I say that is because, like, how far back in your historical lore are we going? I mean, one could make the argument, and I'm making the argument right now, thank you very much, that Disney chose the look for Ariel, the Little Mermaid, based on what they thought would sell back in 1989.
mhm.
Nothing more, nothing less. And we guess what, guys? We're in 2022. What we think might sell is a little bit more diverse than what the people in the 80s thought might sell.
I mean, even a few years after The Little Mermaid came out, she had an animated series, and like we had at least I mean, as I can recall, I've only, obviously not an expert in that area, but I remember at least one brown mermaid who was like, uh, I'm presuming Latina, but she was like deaf and communicated in sign language and stuff. Like, I mean, they obviously were like trying to progress and kind of do more back then. So, I mean, for us to be at this point and kind of still be having this conversation for the umpteenth time, like, ginger side and white replacement and all this other tomfoolery. Like, it's your thing did not stop existing just because the new thing is here. Like,
Yes, but
the
Randy, their white supremacy and their hegemony is very much under assault.
well,
Very much under assault.
it's under assault in their minds. There are not like secret woke police breaking into your house with freaking battering rams and stealing all your VHS tapes with the white one. Like, it's fine. Your movie still exists. It's still real. We're not trying to like burn the books and burn the movies and stuff. It's fine.
And
Like,
listen, and you can
fine.
still have a calypso singing crab, and all of the
Right.
problematic elements that might come from that.
Right. I'm not hearing any complaints about that part. But I digress. Like, you're still going to be able to make your inappropriate little Rule 24 fan art of her over on whatever website of your choosing. You
Yes,
you
yes,
still are able to you're still able to portray this character. That's the beauty of headcanon. You are still able to portray the character how you want her to look. But this movie is a new thing. It is an adaptation. Things change, and that's kind of like the root word of adaptation is adapt, change over
yeah.
time. It's fine.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to get into that is because, obviously, like I said, it's the off season of the racial draft, but it's a big part of what we think about when we think about the racial draft, because we're thinking about like what it means to reimagine a character, through the lens of a different racial or ethnic group. Sometimes a racial or ethnic group is, instrumental and
Mm-hmm.
central to a character, and a lot of times it's not. It's just a matter of the default at that point in time was that this character was white, because
And I
again, go ahead.
yeah, I will slightly pivot to something a tad more, directly related to the racial draft itself. Last couple days, there was a tweet that I quote retweeted, and it was like, it turns out it was a joke. Somebody was being sarcastic, but essentially they were like, well, since Kiki Palmer voiced interest in playing Rogue for the MCU, and so the tweet was like, well, if she's gonna play Rogue, who's a white girl, then we're gonna have Madeline Petch be
Oh,
Storm.
yeah.
And
Who is
yeah, so
real
like
quick? Who's Madeline Catch? Do you know who she is?
Madeline Petch, she plays Cheryl Blossom on the show Riverdale, redhead white girl.
So
Um,
she's not African in any kind of way. No.
no,
Okay, just making
she's
sure.
very white.
Mm.
Yeah, so basically they were like, okay, fine. If you want to take our white character and have her be race bent, and again, to the to the credit of the original poster who I quote retweeted, it was a joke. They were saying it jokingly, but a lot of people were like latching on and like, yeah, you should be able to, if you can take our white characters, we should be able to take your black characters. And it's still going.
Mm.
Not to toot my own horn in terms of virality, but just like, people are really up in arms over this kind of idea that it's, you know, I don't know. I mean, a lot of different conversations kind of end up in this spot, but just sort of feeling like, okay, well, if you do XYZ to uplift or represent black people, then yeah, we obviously must be able to do the exact same thing, because there's clearly no social differential between black people and white people in our society. That's
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I definitely want to have the discussion, with respect to Rogue specifically, but
Mm-hmm,
I hope that Rogue is going to come up in the upcoming season of the racial draft, so we can have that discussion then. But I will briefly say that I think it's been really cool to see all the people who are on board with Kiki Palmer playing
mm-hmm.
Rogue and all the fan art, that's been proliferating. And if
Yep.
you see fan art, listeners, go ahead and tag us, Racial Draft Pod on Twitter, or all of our other socials, and we'll go ahead and share it. If you create fan art, all of that, we're all about it here. So you know, let's keep that coming, keep that movement moving, you know. But let's dive into some nerd news, some bona fide nerd news. There still no X-Men nerd news, so we'll just have to continue to speculate. But staying within the realm of Black women, Ironheart had a bit of casting news, but as is their wont with a lot of the Ironheart casting news, we actually don't know who this actor is going to be playing. Rashida Sheeds Olayewela, from a show called Southside, is joining the cast. Um, again, she's a comedian, writer, and actress. I'm not familiar with her work, but she's a Black woman, and the show's about a Black woman, and Black woman from the South Side of Chicago. So I'm assuming that that's what the South Side means. So I think it's probably appropriate. What do you think, Randy?
I I'm very intrigued to see how it turns out. I will say that much because like we don't have a whole lot to go on in terms of Ironheart's solo kind of mythos.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure they're probably gonna sort of build out and sort of borrow from like we're gonna get some original elements that were not in the comics, and then we're gonna also see some elements borrowed, like we already saw with the Hood being cast. Like he's never previously been one of Ironheart's rogues or anything like that. So
Yeah,
I'm just kind of keeping an open mind at this point.
yeah. What about you, Jared? Do you have any thoughts? Did you read the Ironheart comics?
I did.
Okay.
I so unfortunately I'm not familiar with this actress's body of
Yeah.
work. However, the Ironheart show is definitely a show that I feel my excitement has grown substantially. Um, After the the leaks and again official confirmation that the Hood will be in this
Mm-hmm.
show, I'm just happy that we're not. It does seem like the very basic pull for the show is that it'll be sort of like a tech versus mystic arts,
Mm-hmm.
dark
Yeah.
arts sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy that that not only does that sound really interesting, it's I'm happy not to see just your hero versus an evil dark mirror of themselves
Yep.
with the
Yeah.
same exact power. So
That's
and
cool.
this seems yeah, it seems like they're pulling very heavily from a very specific arc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I if that is so, I am very excited for the show.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we should mention, because it's one of those things that I was more concerned about, but I'm less concerned about now. The fact that they're tying Riri Williams to Wakanda in some way. We
Mm-hmm.
know she's going to appear in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. We also know that we're probably going to get her armor in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. um that adds another dimension to her that doesn't exist in the books at all. So it's a little bit of uncharted territory with respect to the role that Riri will be playing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, we had talked a little bit offline about how T'Challa not being around kind of creates this void in the MCU, and not knowing for sure like which characters are going to sort of step up and occupy that role. I mean, we have Iron Man, Tony Stark not in the universe, and now we have Black Panther not in the universe. Theoretically, there's a way that Ironheart, that Riri Williams could kind of bridge those two gaps. So I'm very curious to see kind of like where they go with her character and where they go with her series. What I will say is very disappointing is that we're going back to the 6 episode structure for the
Mm-hmm.
M for the HBO Max. I'm sorry, the Disney Plus, Disney Plus shows. I still think that the ideal length for these shows are probably 8 episodes, but fingers crossed that they'll you know crack that nut, so to speak, and make 6 episodes work.
I do find it so silly though. Like Disney Plus, it's their own streaming service. Like there's no reason they have full control. They can say we want to do a 7 episode series or an like I feel like the only show that really benefited from the 6 episode format was Loki. And even Loki, I think it could have benefited a little bit from a 7th episode.
Yeah.
But
And even
like
Loki, I think that Loki
Hawkeye,
worked.
yeah.
I think that part of why Loki worked is that right off the bat, when it ended, they were like, "Oh yeah, but we're continuing this in Loki season 2,"
Mm-hmm.
because all the other series um, were basically self-contained stories.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we felt that rush. I think we felt that feeling that they didn't quite tell that story, uh, as well as they could have told it in the 6 hours allotted. That whether it was because a B plot wasn't given the attention that it warranted, whether it was because a character didn't get fleshed out to the extent that
Mm-hmm.
that character would have been fleshed out in a longer season, or you get to the penultimate episodes and you're like, there's so many balls in the air. How can they fight? How can they bring it all home? It's that seemed to be such a common restraint, a common refrain in the fifth episode of all these 6 hour series,
Mm-hmm.
that the hope is that going forward they can figure out how to tell the story with an extra 2 hours or even an extra hour. But
It's such a peculiar issue because like most of these shows are like 3 shows in one. Like even looking at Moon Knight,
mhm,
it's like it's the adventures in Egypt and the Mr. Robot type
mhm,
mystery and the I mean and you know like even Miss Marvel I love kind of becomes a totally different show
mhm.
in episodes 4 and 5. Like it
Yeah,
does season 2 in episodes 4 and 5. And
yeah.
I, I I mean that might be my favorite show out of all of them, but like it's just such a weird issue.
Yeah, I mean, I do think part of it is that it's kind of like, with a movie, you've got your like 3 act structure, quote unquote. And
Mhm.
maybe in conceptualizing the show, you want to say, if you're going to do a 3 act structure, that, you do 2 episodes each, and each of those represent the acts. But
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it's not a movie. You're not sitting
Right.
down and watching it in a 6 hour block. You're watching it from week to week over the course of a month and a half. And at that point, it becomes more like television.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
you got to let that medium breathe a little bit more. Most of our favorite shows are about 10 episodes per season, if
Are
not
there
more.
are are there any of these that you think should have like 100% been a movie instead of just a season?
I think Falcon and Winter Soldier could have been a movie.
I agree.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really the only one that stands out to me as like could have been a movie. Because I mean,
I think
WandaVision when
Hawkeye could have been a movie too.
Hawkeye was
okay,
gonna,
yeah,
I think.
yeah, that's
I
fair.
agree.
But like WandaVision, Loki, Moon Knight, I don't think any. Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't think any of them would have benefited from just being like, oh yeah, this could have been an email. Let's just, just
Well, the thing
quickly
about
kind of
Hawk,
chunk
I'm
it.
sorry, the thing about Moon Knight, I think that Moon Knight could have been a movie, but not with that.
Not with all of that stuff like crammed in. Like
Yeah,
it addressed a lot.
yeah.
It
But I
wouldn't have
also
been
think
as
that like
satisfying.
it would have been very unsatisfying
Right.
because it was more of a character study than
Mm-hmm.
a spectacle.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think Moon Knight would have benefited from additional episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's ironic though, because like WandaVision was actually 9 episodes, and it's one of people's favorites.
Yeah.
One
Yeah. I
of it,
mean,
yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, WandaVision feels like a special case because that last episode really, like, it's lame. It's not bad. I just think
Mhm.
it's really lame, but it gets completely retcon basically with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Hmm.
Like, it leaves Wanda at such a different spot
Mhm.
from where like the movie picks up.
I don't
And
know.
I'd
I
say
mean,
that
I feel like if I know that COVID threw off a lot of the timelines. I feel like if we would have gotten WandaVision and then a month later gotten Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I don't think it would have felt that discordant, especially if they had said that, a year had passed between like the end of WandaVision and and Multiverse of Madness. But I think that ironically, the year that passed allowed us to think that there was more resolution than there actually was. You know?
I mean, that just comes from the fact that like social media has a tendency to like chew over its food for way too freaking long. Like we
Mm-hmm.
kept getting like all kinds of different conversations and like going through all the different aspects from every kind of episode and all. Like we got so much conversation about it, and so much of like fans reading into stuff and recontextualizing stuff and even just some revisionism that like by the time we finally got around to actually seeing Multiverse of Madness, people were like, well, it didn't make sense that she turned evil, even though we just saw that she ended WandaVision having the dark hold. Like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and even though people were like, Wanda never faced any accountability for the things that she did in WandaVision, well, it's like, well, guess what? After she didn't face any accountability for the things she did in WandaVision, she got the
It got
dark hold.
worse. Right.
She
It
got,
got worse.
so maybe she said, well, I messed up trying to create this like TV show type deal. Maybe what I need to do is do something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So there was a lot that like people just glossed over and you know,
Right.
yeah.
But one thing that I mean, it's weird because I've been enjoying this phase. This is phase 5, right? Or is this phase
we're in
4?
phase 4.
This is still phase 4. Sorry. So I've been enjoying phase 4, but I do think that it's been a little harder with the shows and the movies of like maintaining the timeline.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it used to kind of be that whatever came next comes next
Right.
in the future. Now you're just kind of like, well, this happened between this thing and this other thing. But this thing that came out last month actually takes place in the future, and this is between. You know what I mean? Like less of that, less of that,
COVID's
less of that.
definitely been responsible for a lot of that, though.
Sure, 100%. But I wish that there was a way that they could just like we get this stuff because we're on the internet,
Yeah.
and we're like 12 blog articles will come out and we'll read them all and we'll know. But I think that the average fan is not being presented with when these stories take place. And I do think
Well,
that that's hurting.
but I also don't necessarily think that the general audience particularly cares. Like I don't think they think about it that deeply just because like, you know, it's very easy to kind of get immersed in Twitter and feel like that's sort of a reflection of, because it is so many people, you kind of get a feeling like, oh, this is like sort of my sample size of
Mhm.
sort of how everybody generally takes it. But when you like if I talk to some friends of mine who are out in meat space, you can sort of get a different reflection of like, actually I thought that movie was great, it was blah 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 blah. And it's like that you sort of have to recontextualize that
No,
Twitter
but
is sort of, it is a microcosm, but it's not quite as accurate a reflection as some folks like to make it out to.
yeah, but I do think that one of the things that worked really well with the Marvel stuff is the
Mm-hmm.
momentum. And it didn't always happen. I will fully acknowledge that. But one of
Yeah.
the things that used to happen is that one project would end and it would lead almost directly into the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that would get you hyped for that thing. So like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Through line
if
was much more clear.
yes. So like
Right.
love it. So like when we watch Love and Thunder, you know, whatever they put in the post credit scene for Love and Thunder would we'd maybe go like no more than two projects before that would be followed up. Or
Yeah.
Multiverse of Madness would have an Easter egg that would lead into Black Panther. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not happening to the same extent anymore. And I think that that's been frustrating for fans and also been a little bit frustrating for even like casual people because they have to get their bearings a little bit whenever they get into a new show,
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
or a new movie. So like while I think that a lot of the criticisms of She-Hulk have been unreasonable, I think that if She-Hulk was somehow teased in the last thing that people watched,
Mm-hmm.
they would have a sense of like what the vibe is, and they'd be on board, and it wouldn't take them 2 or 3 episodes to get their bearings.
Yeah.
But again, this is a little bit of navel gazing, just as we're doing like the overall. Like I for one, I mean, it's been a while since we've had an episode of Shulkin and Jiva. We're gonna bring that back. But yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying the show so far, and it's been a nice departure from your standard uh, Disney Plus. Um, I don't want to use the word formula, but the standard Disney Plus orientation, going the 6 episode series and the
Mm-hmm.
dramatic movie told over 6 weeks thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies told over 6 weeks, we should talk a little bit about Star Wars. You guys like Star Wars, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, the Acolyte, or as I like to call it, the Blackolite, um, is continuing to cast people that are not white. So we're here for it in the racial draft. Manny Jacinto, who you might know from the Good Place, has also been cast to play another of the emerging dark side powered users. This is set in the final days of the High Republic era, in the beginnings, the earliest stages of the dark side. Like I said, it's already Amanda Stenberg rather, Lee Jong Jae, who you might know from Squid Game, Jodie Turner Smith. These are all pretty uh, pretty well regarded actors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys know a lot about Manny Jacinto's stuff?
I
Um,
recall hearing his name. That's kind of it.
What about you, Jarrett?
I happen to love The Good Place, and
Okay,
Jason Mendoza is my favorite character from that show.
awesome.
He's also like very briefly in the new Top Gun movie. But yeah, I think this Manny Jacinto, the more of him, the better.
Awesome, awesome. So I mean, this is the other side of the puzzle, right? Where like people talk about, oh, race banding is bad. You need to create your own characters. And it's like, all right, well, we've created our own characters in the Star Wars universe. It's like not like that, not like that. So
Every time.
shout out to the galaxy far, far away. Um, the dark side's getting a little darker. You know what I mean? Um, what else was there? So there's some not Star Wars, not Marvel, but still in the geek space. Are you guys familiar with a video game called Gran Turismo? No, Gran Turismo.
I am not.
Never
Jarrett,
played it, but I know of it.
it is a racing video game that I have actually played, even though I'm not much of a gamer. Sony PlayStation, they're still trying to make that video game fetch happen. And they've got Orlando Bloom, David Harbour, and rising actor Archie Madekwe are going to be on this project. It's directed by Neil Blomkamp, who you might know from District 9 and Elysium. So yeah, they're doing a racing video game based movie, and that will be Gran Turismo. Any other thoughts about Gran Turismo, Randy?
I have never played it. I don't know anything about it. Like the closest thing my mind is thinking of is like another version of Fast and Furious, which I also have not watched or anything like that. But I mean, if it looks good, if the trailer looks good, I will give it a try, you know.
Okay, all right. Additionally, we should talk a little bit about DC Comics, or sorry, DC films. Um, Joker, Foley Adu, has casted an actor named Jacob Lofland, who I am not familiar with at all. What about you, Randy? Jacob Lofland?
I also am not familiar with him, but from what I saw of his face, like some people are like fan casting that he might be a young Jonathan Crane. I mean, I
Yeah,
I
he does
can
have that. He does have that crane face. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I could imagine him being awkward and creepy like that. Yeah. It kind of gives a little bit of, the edge lord who like is a little bit too into horror movies and stuff. Yeah, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, they said he's going to be playing an inmate in the asylum who develops a relationship with a Joker, but that could be anyone, really, if we're being honest. Um, so yeah, we'll stay posted. We'll try to figure out, who he could be playing. But Jonathan Crane wouldn't be a bad idea, especially if they do a deal where like Jonathan Crane's father is a doctor,
Hmm.
in the asylum. I mean, I know that there are incarnations where like he's not the first, um, not the first scarecrow-ish
Yeah.
person.
I mean,
So,
I will throw this out there again. We
Okay.
already have perfect Jonathan Crane in this movie, in Catherine Keener. So,
Yeah, you did mention that. So yeah,
uh, uh,
a gender bent scarecrow.
gender, but you guys you heard it here first, okay?
Okay,
I
all
I,
right.
I really hope that that comes to fruition.
Well, regardless, this is movie, as we would like to remind you, does have a musical component. So we'll find out what they're going to be singing and dancing about when this movie comes about. What else? What else? Staying in the realm of DC, little movie called Constantine, depending on where how you want to play it. Keanu Reeves is back, people. Shout out to the multiracial delegation for
hmm
all of a sudden getting the opportunity to bring John Constantine back into the fold in the sequel to the when did this movie come out?
Early 2000s, right? Like
Early, yeah,
2005 or something like that.
yeah, before the Keanu Renaissance, the Keanu Science, if you will. Um, yeah, so there's a Constantine sequel. There is a Constantine series that we talked about in
Hmm.
development with J.J. Abrams with a Black Constantine.
In,
Um,
in development ish.
no, it's so here's the thing. It's still in development. It's just HBO Max was like, that meme where someone's walking with their girlfriend and they look back. That's them in Keanu, and not them in Black Constantine, because HBO Max has passed on this Constantine series, but they will be shopping it. Warner Brothers Discovery will be shopping it to different outlets, So it's still being made, which is, yeah, brings us right into our new story, which is J.J. Abrams' Constantine series will be shopped elsewhere. um, and in addition to Constantine, also Madam X.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, you're a DC head. Who's Madam X again?
Madam Xanadu
Oh yeah,
is
Madam Xanadu. That's what it was.
yeah. I mean, the movie you were on, you were on point. The movie itself is called Madam X, but it's based around Madam Xanadu, who's this ancient seer mystic. Like she often like she's involved in like the tarot and stuff like that. That's sort of her calling card, pun intended, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, she's really uh instrumental in sort of the function of at least the original incarnation of Justice League Dark. And I believe she was around the time of like Merlin and King Arthur and stuff like that. So she's an ancient and powerful
Mm-hmm.
character who is like, she's due for a thing by now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my general feelings is that I we sort of had it's just very strange, this decision to me, like just as is like 95% of everything else that Warner Brothers Discovery has been doing since this but
So
I mean,
here's why it's not as baffling to me.
mhm,
Um, Keanu Reeves right now is pretty popular.
yeah,
He's got, the Matrix thing didn't really go down the way we wanted it to, but he's got the John Wick movies. Like I
yes,
would say he's potentially more popular now than he's ever been. And he did
I
say
think that's
that,
fair, yeah.
he wanted to revisit the character. So if you're DC, if you're Warner Brothers, and you want to bring a very beloved actor into the fold, and he says this is who he wants to play, you find a way to make that happen. But to the extent that if they think that they can make good money with a movie, it's not it's very hard to make good money with a streaming series
I
unless you
mean, I
unless you sell it.
I understand that, and that obviously you anytime I kind of have these qualms about it, you lay it out pretty well. I will say, but just strictly on sort of the story side of it,
Mm-hmm.
it it feels like, to what end? You get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
you get, say for example, if you got another if you were to get another Michael Keaton Batman movie right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it should or should not happen, whatever. If we get
Mm-hmm.
another one announced, then by all means. But it just feels like, to what end, especially when you are having another like Constantine movie. His
Mm-hmm.
movie is going to still remain pronounced Constantine. I'm pretty
Oh, you
sure.
never know. They might switch it
Yeah.
up. I mean,
Like,
no, but
oh,
here's what I would say. Like for years they've been trying to develop this
mhm,
Justice League Dark movie,
yeah,
and they haven't been able to, like, figure it out.
right.
If Keanu Reeves becomes essentially the Iron Man, to their Justice League Dark, then
But
then
but
they
but
that.
but
Mhm.
but that presumes that he's gonna become that, though. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Like
no, for sure. But like you said, to what end, right? If the end
mhm,
is Constantine sequel happens,
mhm,
it makes good money, and people want to see more of him in the movies.
right.
Now you've got a
But
bona fide movie star to anchor your team movie that you can
yes,
bring
but
out.
but but it still poses the question: if you're going to have him be the guy,
Mm-hmm.
what is the? I mean, then it shifts. The ball goes into the other side of the court. It's like, okay, well, then what is the purpose of the series?
Yeah, but again,
Like,
but with the same way that, like, I don't know, have you watched the Sandman show on Netflix?
I haven't,
Okay,
not yet.
it's really good. It's really good. So there's a Sandman show. there's a Lucifer show.
Mm-hmm.
There's a world in which those shows should be connected, but they're not.
Right.
You know, um, I think this. I don't know if you have a story on this. I probably didn't attach the story. I think that the whole like connected universe ethos
Mm-hmm.
for DC is not that they're not going to have connected projects,
Oh
but I
yeah,
think
they're
that
playing a lot more fast and loose with it now.
yeah, I think that that's not going to be the default. I think the
They're they're
default,
they're happy they're happy to be like, take each project as it comes and don't just assume that it's connected to a larger thing. Yeah.
yeah. So if their feeling is that these are the ones that we can connect, and then
Mm-hmm.
these are the ones that we don't have to connect, but someone wants to pay us money for it, that's where I think that's the realm that I think that the Madam X and the Constantine show are going to fall in the
And
realm.
see, that makes me all the more frustrated, just because it's like, okay, at least if you're gonna do something that's not in continuity, at least do something that's like not a version of the thing. Like if say for example, it's like if they were gonna like chop out a Batman movie. Like, why do that when you could try to get something else that already is not being done? Like, now we just have one Constantine and one Constantine,
Yeah.
and like, that's
No. I mean, realistically, again, you haven't seen Sandman. There's
right.
actually a third Constantine on the Sandman show.
Ah,
Like,
okay.
but which is funny because none of that is constant. But it's very unconstant. But I get that. But I guess the feeling is that if it's on HBO Max, then maybe we can presume that it's connected. But if it's not on HBO Max, then that gives them a little bit of a cover as to it not being connected.
I remain very frustrated at the case of inconsistentine and Justice League Dark. I'm very frustrated right now. 'Cause, I mean, like, again, I am a proponent of the multiverse. I don't mind the multiverse. I don't think that it is automatically like a bad thing, even though, obviously there are some fallbacks that some pitfalls that it can have to it. But my feeling always, in terms of the way that you approach that sort of thing, should be that if you're exploring a new universe,
Mm-hmm.
you can use that to build new ground, not necessarily to reimagine something that already is established. You don't have to say the multiverse means that we get 3 and 4 Jokers, 3 and 4 Batman. Like, no, I mean, you can give us multiple things, and I understand that's going to happen sometimes, but there's a lot of that seems to kind of like more than I'm comfortable with. I'll put it that way, because we after Arrowverse did Crisis on Infinite Earths, we're hearing like, oh well, Warner Brothers had intended to do that in the movies too, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. Like, we want to try to like we want to try to tread new ground, and
But
again, not
if
go
I may
ahead.
present the counterpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the counterpoint, as I see it, is that it's the less known characters
Mm-hmm.
that need the connected universe more.
Yeah, true.
So it's kind of like you use Batman to bring in Nightwing and to
Right.
bring in Robin. Like you have these established characters, and then you bring them into the connected universe, um, so that people have a connection to those characters. But
Yeah.
when it's a character that people already like, you don't need to connect it to anything else because people are showing up for that. So like Joker, for instance, they don't have to connect Joker that Joker from the what's the actor's name, the help me out guys,
Adam,
Who? Phoenix?
Sorry.
You're talking about Joaquin Phoenix?
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix. Thank you. You don't have to connect Joaquin Phoenix's Joker to Michael Keaton, for instance, because people already like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. So you can have him have his own sequel with Lady Gaga or whoever, because people are going to show up because it's the Joker movie.
I just find all this so silly because it's exactly what Zaslav and the new regime basically said they weren't going to do.
No, I think it's exactly what they said they were going to do.
Wasn't their whole thing that they just wanted to completely clean the slate?
No. So their whole thing was what was happening before is that they were programming for HBO Max.
True.
Like they were trying to create content for HBO Max, even though before HBO Max existed, they were creating content for whoever would pay money for it, and that included their superhero stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that what happened is that, you know, Marvel, there's not really that same kind of attachment to Marvel characters as there is to DC characters. You don't really need 7 Black Panthers, for instance. You know what I mean? Like in the way that you can have 7 Batman.
Yeah.
Like so it's actually to their detriment to only have 1 Batman when the market can clearly sustain 7 Batman. You know, so like if every
that's profoundly depressing as a fan. Because it's like
I mean, it might but it might be. But if you're the entity that owns Batman, and you know that there are 7 people who would pay money to have a Batman show, like you charge money for the 7 Batman show.
I mean,
you know
yes. I mean that's sort of the frustration of it all for me. Not even necessarily that it's like, oh, Batman. Like I could cope. I could deal with it if it was not like only the Justice League people. Or
but
like,
hey, listen, we just
yeah.
established they're gonna get 3 Constantines. They're gonna get the Constantine that's Keanu Reeves. They're gonna get the Constantine that's the brother. I forgot his name. You know, potentially, and then it's also gonna be Joanna Constantine. Hopefully, the fingers crossed, Netflix. You know, growing out of the Sandman universe. So like, I mean, it just so happened, you know, we know that they can sustain 7 Batman. Like apparently they can sustain 3 Constantine times.
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he is that to the magical world. He is the Batman of the magical world. So, like, again, it translates to like kind of the most sort of basic, you know, kind of person that you can choose. Like, hey, yeah, Batman, that guy, he's doing stuff. What's he up to? And then, you know, that more of the oxygen in terms of what you're sort of approaching is, you know, the way that you can, like, we have what was, didn't Batman just recently have an animated movie where he was like with the Justice League Dark?
Yes, he did.
See, that's he should have a lane. You get what I'm saying?
His lane is all of the lanes. Yeah,
it's like he doesn't have a lane. He's like the we have like the little the little Hot Wheels track, and then we have like the regular cars that go inside of the lane, and each one has their own. And then he's like the big Mack truck that just like covers all
and
of
look,
the lanes.
And this is where I remind the listeners, even the new listeners, that in season 5 of the racial draft, every delegation is getting their own Batman. Because clearly there's no limit to the amount of appetite for Batman. So why should there just be 1 Batman? Why shouldn't every ethnicity have a Batman? But go on. Yes, there's no lane.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's the fictional equivalent of dystopian is what it feels like. Because we sort of even Aquaman is gonna have the Batman appearance in it, and like the Flash, for all of its fraught goings on, is gonna also have at least one Batman involved, and it's just
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
it's
mean, this is as good enough a time as any to remind you that even though HBO Max passed on the new Batman animated series called Batman Cape Crusader,
mhm.
that's being sold. Not on HBO Max. I believe they said that the main candidates for the project were between Netflix, Amazon, and Apple as the top candidates to pay Warner Brothers Discovery money to get that animated series. So again, more Batman.
Oh, heaven forbid we bypass that sorely overlooked and underused character. Oh,
Never enough. Never enough Cape Crusader. But let's see. Is there more DC news before we transition? No, I think that's it. I think we covered the whole DC of it. So now let's bring it back to the Disney. So Disney shifted around their movie calendar, y'all. Some one movie pour out some liquor for Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Um, we don't know if it's been canceled outright, but it's been taken off of the calendar. It was supposed to come out December 22nd, 2023. The first Star Wars movie after Rise of Skywalker, which was not well received. Patty Jenkins, who you might know from Wonder Woman 1984,
mhm.
um, was supposed to direct said movie. Um, don't think she's going to be directing that movie, but taken off the calendar, and some of the movies have been shifted around. So there's a new Snow White movie coming out in 2024, a movie called Ello, also 2024, Inside Out 2, also 2024, the Mufasa Lion King prequel, also 2024. Um, what else? Haunted Mansion, August 11th, 2023. There were some untitled Marvel movies that were moved around. Let me get to that. Sorry, guys. Untitled Marvel movies. So, yeah, so none of the titled Marvel movies have changed. But yeah, sorry, guys, I don't have the dates for the untitled Marvel movies that have been shifted, but they were shifted, I think, in the same year, not shifted. So yeah, there was one that was supposed to come out February 16th, 2024, and it's now going to come out September 6th, 2024. I think a lot of people were speculating that was going to be a Deadpool movie, but it could also be a Shang-Chi movie. So we'll see. Um, this is hmm? So yeah, I mean, movies getting shifted around. Not bad news, but still news. Still news. Additionally, are you guys fans of the Blade Runner series? Here or
I
there?
am not.
I understand. I have not seen the Blade Runner sequel, and I wasn't a huge fan of the original Blade Runner movie.
Mhm.
It was cool. I probably need to rewatch it. Um, but Blade Runner 2099 is going to be a series set in the Blade Runner universe, and that's been picked up by Prime Video. So Amazon, they're probably going to pour a lot of money into it. They're going to do some Blade Runner. I think it's kind of funny that of all the things all the entities going to be depicting a dystopian tech no cyberpunk universe where corporations rule everything. you know, of all the entities that would depict that. Amazon.
I mean, yeah, that was like Netflix is like they're trying to make Squid Game. They're trying to
Squid
make Squid Game work for them. So
yeah, there's a Squid Game game show where they're going to be competing for the all the money. I didn't actually add that to the docket, but um I don't. I mean, I know they're not at least advertising that people are going to die. So spoilers for
Never
Squid Game.
know.
You never know. I mean, look, would you stop watching it if people were dying? Be honest.
I reserve comment for the purposes of the show. I plead the fifth or whatever the podcast equivalent is.
Yeah,
Part
exactly.
of me wants to sign up for the show, even knowing damn well that there's a possibility I will get killed off if I don't successfully complete a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, the way my finances are set up, I understand.
I mean, how else am I going to pay for college? You know, sometimes you gotta do things like you gotta join Squid Games to pay for college. You know, it's real life.
So yeah, they're
I
competing
mean,
for 4.56 million, which isn't that much money, but it's 456 players. Like that is amazing. It is amazing. Everybody's worth your life is worth $100,000.
I mean, to be fair, at least Squid Game is like you get money at the end, as opposed to Hunger Games where you just
Live. You just get to live.
at least I get to make the billionaires in their high tower laugh. Like at least they get to have a show.
No, I get that. No, you're right. I just think it's funny because like um you didn't have to create the dystopian world. You just had to like have our world
Right.
where people are just like for $100,000, potentially $4.56 million. Who do I have to kill?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the people who brought you Squid Game, the fictional series Squid Game, they're bringing you the real series Squid Game. So, I mean, what's funny is how many of those people actually work for Netflix and they just want the money so that Netflix ends up in the black next quarter. David Zaslav is competing in the Squid Game. He's like, listen, we got to do what we got to do to pay these bills, guys. All right.
Shareholders happy.
And that brings us to, I believe, our final story. Nope. Second to final story. Our second to final story. Good news. Back in the world of Marvel, Jeff Loveness, who recently wrote Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, is also going to be writing Avengers: Kang Dynasty, which is going to be directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, who directed Shang-Chi. Guys, are you familiar with a lot of Dennis Loveness's work?
I am not.
What about you, Jarrett?
So he wrote a lot, or I don't think he wrote. He might have been like the like he has a lot of written by credits on some of the recent episodes of Rick and Morty.
Okay.
A show that I do still watch. One of which in season 4 was probably the best episode of season that particular season, the vat of acid episode.
Okay, I do love that episode. Yeah.
And then he wrote the first episodes of the last season, which were hands down the best because the other ones weren't that great.
Yeah.
But
And shout out to Jessica Gao, who also worked on Rick and Morty.
Yeah, I mean, Jessica Gao is the one responsible for Pickle Rick.
Mm-hmm.
So usually it seems that when like a writer who has previously written on something, uh, when they bring them to write something else, clearly seems that they like their work. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Michael Waldron originally wrote Loki. Um, so I think it's a fantastic pair. I couldn't have hoped for a better pair up than Destin Daniel Cretton and Jeff Loveness. I mean, they must like what they have on their hands with Quantum Mania, or Quantum Mania must just really feed well into Kang Dynasty for them to bring Loveness back. So
Yeah, cool. What about you, Randy? You have any thoughts about Jeff Lesness?
Well, I'm not familiar with his work. I am vaguely familiar with Rick and Morty. I would say I have not watched the show, but I do know that they like involve a lot of like dimensional travel and sort of other sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
shenanigans and stuff. So I mean, clearly he's on a very popular show that deals with similar subject matter. So clearly they like something they saw, and as Jared said, and I'm very interested in seeing how that experience with that particular part of the genre shines through.
All right. And the final story, which is the probably the most controversial story of the week. Marvel Studios issued a statement, very brief statement, with regard to what we talked about last week, and that was the introduction of Sabra into the MCU. There was an article in the New York Times where they talked about kind of how dicey of a proposition of bringing this character with the problematic history, was into the MCU. The quote is, let's see if I can find it. This is a Marvel quote. While our characters and stories are inspired by the comics, they are always freshly imagined for the screen and today's audience. And the filmmakers are taking a new approach with the character Sabra, who was first introduced into the comics over 40 years ago. Not really saying a lot, but saying kind of what we talked about, which is that, yeah, it's not going to be a one-for-one translation
Mm-hmm.
of the character. So despite any of the panels that you might bring to the table, um, not not that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just frustrating that we even have had, I guess that we've had sort of had people not necessarily bring up the conversation, because obviously the conversation needs having, but bring up the conversation having already jumped to the conclusions. Like, we already know, first of all, just generally as a person who watches these adaptations, these movies, these shows, they never do an exact one-to-one translation from the comics ever.
wait,
Ne-
Randy, you're telling me they never do a direct one-to-one adaptation of the comics? Like Shang-Chi's father wasn't Fu Manchu.
Like, I mean, like, yeah, but that, like, literally they never do a perfect recreation. I mean, if for no other reason, just because you can't fit all of that freaking history into like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But they
Not to
never
mention
do.
the fact that like our understanding
Mhm.
as a society of what the Israel Palestine conflict was in 1980 is
Right.
different from what our understanding of this conflict is in 2022.
Yeah. I mean, like,
And
just
it would be weird to have a character in 2022 who looks at the conflict the way that people looked at that conflict 40 years ago.
yeah, yeah. And I will say, like, we've gotten some problematic characters before. This is not our first time seeing a problematic character. We have a character who literally is based on another character called Man Ape.
Man ape.
He is not called Man Ape. in the movies, nor should he be. Like we get the fact that there are some problematic elements, and like we didn't quite get
Look, we have a character who was a Nazi,
yeah,
and we love this character.
right, exactly. Baron Zemo is vastly different in the movies than he is in the comics. And you know, M'Baku is not the same guy that we see as Manape in the comics. Eros, I'm fairly certain when we see him on the screen, he's not going to be doing unseemly things to She-Hulk. He's not going to be that same guy. Like
He's
I
not.
really
You
highly
mean
doubt
he's
that.
not going to use his powers to take advantage of women sexually? Is it? You're telling
Yeah,
me no, no?
I'm fairly certain we can discount that possibility.
Okay. And look, it's. I mean, we don't have a listeners. If you are a member of the Swana community, we are opening up the discourse, open invite to come on the show and present your perspectives, because we want to hear perspectives from all sides of any discussion. So this is not us silencing voices from different communities. However, we can only represent, like, who we are, and our different perspectives. Like, how we want to look at the situation is that the history of these characters, to the extent that they are problematic, to the extent that they are worthy of critique, those critiques should be made. We should call out racism, um, hate from different eras. But just because those characters did exist in that form, that doesn't mean that those characters will exist in that form today, particularly when they cross media.
Mm.
And it's, I don't, I just think it's reasonable to want these characters to be presented in a better light, because if you're an IP based company, and you own the rights to a character, you don't want that character to be offensive.
No.
You don't want people to like Google that character and be like, "Oh, this character is hateful." I think that it's perfectly reasonable for someone who owns the rights to a character to say, "Yeah, we made some mistakes with the character, but now in 2022, this is what this character represents. This is who this character is." And hopefully, not to say that we should ignore or erase the problems inherent in the character in the past, but you know we want to do better.
As an Israeli Jew, I totally understand like the concern that
Mm-hmm.
people have over the introduction of the character, and I am happy that, I mean, it really went without saying, but I am happy that Marvel did release a statement. However, what does get me upset is when people are like, they shouldn't do this character, period, just because this character did have like a questionable
Yeah.
past that was, I mean, very much of its
Yeah.
time.
And I would take it. Sorry to cut you off, but I
No,
would take
no.
it a step. I would take it a step further, because there's that discussion,
Mhm.
but then there's the discussion which does make me uncomfortable, which is when people say that to even introduce an Israeli character
Yeah, that
shouldn't, like, it's something that they shouldn't
It's a
do.
very easy slippery slope to sort of make room for the anti-Semitic commentary.
Yeah. Like,
I
it's one thing to say that this character's history is so bad that it couldn't possibly be
Mhm.
redeemed.
yeah.
And then to say this character is Israeli and we shouldn't have an Israeli character.
In my opinion, I don't know how others may feel about it, though I do see that as anti-Semitism, plain and simple. At like Israel was created back in 1948 as a Jewish state, and like in its simplest form, to say that a character should not exist because they are Israeli is I do consider that anti-Semitism. So those are just my feelings about it.
No. I mean, and again, that's just I'm glad. That's why I'm glad you're here. Because like I think that it's possible to both critique the character
Yeah.
while acknowledging that 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 the stance that the character shouldn't exist
Yeah.
is anti-Semitic.
The character does need an update though.
Yes.
So hopefully Marvel will deliver on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
again,
whether,
and go ahead. Sorry, Randy.
No, I just was saying whether the specific details are particularly satisfactory is a different aspect of that conversation. But
Totally.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. Like once they actually do present the character, then we can have a discussion as to how well they did about rehabilitating the character, and then we can base it on what we actually did get. We can say like, what, there were still some problematic elements there. It's unfortunate they didn't completely redeem the character, but because we haven't seen the character, I don't feel comfortable saying that this character is incapable of being redeemed.
Right.
I'm fully withholding judgments, though I do remain optimistic. I mean, I consider Wenwu the best villain that Marvel has had, that Marvel has put out.
Okay.
And Wenwu, the Mandarin, he's not even really the Mandarin in the movie, but the Mandarin, the character that Wenwu is directly adapted from, is incredibly problematic.
Incredibly racist.
Like, look at what they did. Like, I think people are valid to freak out, but like Marvel knows cut them a little bit of slack. Like they know what they're doing, kind of, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, but again, if I may be a little bit of devil's advocate, if you're the kind of person who feels like Marvel doesn't really take strong moral stances when it comes to like geopolitics and and what's issues that are happening in the world, and you yourself feel like strong stances need to be taken, I can understand why you might feel like this is perhaps too much of a minefield.
I think sort of in that consideration, like, I mean, personally, I'm of the mind that I don't really need movies to, like, I don't need fiction to sort of inform my worldview.
Okay.
And so I feel like, it is sort of it's not as if I am of like the escapist mindset. Of course, obviously you have real world considerations and stuff like that, but some people take it to such an extreme that it sort of ignores the fact that the filmmakers, the studios are trying to tell a story, and they're trying to tell a story that can appeal to as many people as possible. They have a line, they have a tightrope to walk, and frankly, as long as they're not like trying to say that these morally reprehensible people are good people, like, I mean, you have to look at the context of it all. You have to kind of know who is being lionized and who's being demonized, and don't just say, okay, all Israeli people. Like, okay, no, if they belong to a certain faction, then you can sort of be like, oh well, this group, they did da 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 da, and they,
Yeah.
that's different. But if you just generally just say all people belonging to this ethnicity, then that crosses a line from being legitimate criticism to being being anti-Semitic.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this before. I can't remember if we talked about it on the show, but like Captain America, Steve Rogers, the character,
Mm-hmm.
like he stands for often, like, even though my country does X,
Mm-hmm.
I don't approve of that because I stand for more important values.
Mhm.
I will
My
constantly, go against what
mm-hmm.
the government does because what the government does is immoral.
Yes, and there's people who still feel like he represents like sort of the upholding of the white supremacist status quo.
Yeah.
Like there's people who still kind of go, like because he drapes himself in the colors, then obviously he stands for all of what America has done, even though we've seen the context of like, no, he's actually been very much adamant about trying to hold our country accountable and sort of appeal to our better angels so that we can, elevate ourselves.
Yeah. So, and I agree with that. And I think that, like, you can be a fan of Captain America
Mhm.
while also saying, but America does some fuck shit. Like,
Right, exactly, yes.
and the hope is that that same kind of nuance can be applied to the character of Sabra,
Mm-hmm.
where, like, she takes a similar stance that, like, yes, I'm Israeli. Yes, I was created through the Israeli super soldier program, which I assume is what's happening, right? Um, However, there's some stuff that
Yeah,
I don't stand for, and I'm going to stand for being a hero. I'm going to stand for people's lives and not people suffering, no matter what their ethnicity is, no matter what their religion is, and I'm not, going to, again, one of the more problematic things that happened in the comics was when they first presented her, they presented her as someone who didn't feel that way.
yeah,
And I totally get why someone might read the comics and say, no, you better not, put that on our screen, and
yeah.
ask us to see her as a hero. But
Right.
even if we just look at Sabra's appearances in the last 5 to 10 years, that's not who she is.
He's softened as a character. Like we didn't like again. I don't know if I'm fairly certain I mentioned it last week on
Mhm.
but in reference to Agents of Wakanda, I believe it happened in or maybe like
I think
the
it might have been the Black Panther book, actually.
I think it may have been that, or maybe like the Avengers comic that kind of led up to it, or something like that. But it was fairly recently where Black Panther assembles these, multinational heroic figures, and we sort of had like I think it was Arabian Night and Sabra were sitting like right next to each other or fairly close to each other,
Mhm.
and they had kind of like a little exchange. I mean, a couple of decades ago, she was just lighting up Muslim people just, that just, on sight. That was
Yeah.
just kind of how she was. And we sort of expected that from her. And there was no kind of positive uh there was nothing really positive to be drawn from it. There was no room for like, oh yes, and I sort of draw a distinction between civilians and combatants, or I try to distinguish between, people who believe this particular belief or who don't. It just was she was like Israeli, that's just who she was.
Mm. Yeah. If anything, she was less Captain American, more John Walker. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
um, now I'm gonna put this out there because I predicted it in another platform. I think that the character that is understood to be Arabian Night,
Mm-hmm.
in other media, I think that character is going to show up in in this movie, in
I
Captain
mean,
America: New World Order.
I can't think of like much of a better place where he should show up. Like
I
that's
just
a
think that
little
he's
bit,
not going to be he's not going to be called the Arabian Night.
of
Um,
course.
I don't think he's going to have any of the like overly stereotyped
Right,
characteristics that we associate with Arabian Night. I think he's
right.
basically going to be the counterbalance um, for sorry. Go ahead, Jared.
No. You continue. You
Yeah, I
continue.
think he's going and counterbalance is probably the wrong terminology. I think he's going to be like um the counterpart like of Sabra in the Muslim world. And I
I
in
I
fact in fact I think that they're going to be allies. Like I don't think they're going to be you know rivals in any way. I think it's just basically going to be we're both super soldiers. We were
mhm.
both created at a time, when our respective governments were trying to, you
Come up with
know,
their answer to Captain America.
yeah, but also trying to like one up one another,
Mhm.
But in fact, we're two people who want the same things,
Yeah,
and that makes us allies despite what our countries our
right.
respective countries might want us to be.
Um, was it here where someone suggested Layla to show up in
Yes, yeah, we talked about that.
yeah.
um
You think it's gonna be um
I think that would be really cool. um and maybe if they do that, if they have Layla instead of, like, I just think that we know how Layla was created,
yeah. No,
and we
I
and
agree.
yeah, and whereas if they do that parallel where there were like there was an Israeli super soldier, there was a like Muslim super soldier, and then like wouldn't you know it, they ended up like meeting, and they were like, what are we doing, like we're not, we're both, we both want the same things, you know what I mean? I can see how like very quickly and efficiently in the story you can present the two of them as allies,
Hmm.
and show that neither of those characters represent the
They're not
proper,
100% beholden to the governments that wanted
yeah,
to weaponize them.
and again, and they're not part of whatever propaganda that either
Hmm.
Hmm.
group wants to say that the other is,
Right.
you know because I think that that's the concern, right? The concern is that by presenting that you will present an Israeli super soldier in such a way as to make her Zionist propaganda, you know, that through her she will say or do things that end up excusing things that happen in the real world that we
Hmm.
shouldn't be excusing,
Right.
like, and I get that critique, I get that argument, but I also think that we shouldn't assume that that's what they're setting out to do.
Right.
you know I think that both looking at the context of what the story in the MCU is, and just looking at the context of like comic books in general and heroism in general, like they're not trying to promote a nefarious agenda. Like, I know that people on Twitter want to say that they are, but they're not.
I
Like,
mean, again, before my internet connection was so rudely interrupted, like I don't even know if y'all caught it, but I mean, Kevin Feige, or one of the higher up people, was disturbed even by the idea of Doctor Strange mansplaining magic to Wanda. So like if you're bothered and disturbed by something on that sort of level to the point where you just like remove the scene, like I could see if you like tried to alter it or trying to make it a little bit softer, he removed that scene, like it just didn't happen. And so if they make the consideration on that sort of level, on just like a social, like don't be a jerk kind of level, then how much more are we going to think about like the geopolitics of it all? You're obviously not dealing with someone who sort of takes these things lightly. Right, exactly.
I mean, we've seen the way they handled like these sorts of things before. I mean, like take Miss Marvel. Like I'll be honest, I'm not. I mean, obviously, I'm not Pakistani, but like, I feel like the way they handled partition was like they handled it with such care and class. Like the people who were telling that story clearly knew, like, clearly they wanted to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And like I wouldn't say this is like one for one, but like
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's somewhat dicey topics.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
whole Israeli-Palestinian
Right.
conflict is very hot button today.
Yeah.
Um,
But again, like I said before, I think that if you're the kind of person that wants a strong stance being taken, like if you want like them to present a world in which one of the characters looks at the camera and goes, Israel, you're doing this wrong. And
Then go watch a documentary.
you know what I mean? Like, and that, the apartheid and genocide of the Pakistan of the Palestinian people must stop. Like, that's not going to happen. I know for a
Yeah,
fact that that's not
exactly.
going to, you know,
Exactly.
like, but you're also not going to get a situation in which one of the characters looks at the camera and goes, we're Israel. Everything that we do for the Jewish state is completely acceptable, and all you brown people are terrorists, and you deserve to burn in hell. You know what I mean? Like it's like they're not going to do that either. They're not going to like be like super extreme. Like
Yeah, I mean it's very easy to try to simplify it in like social media terms, but yeah, they're not gonna do that. It's ridiculous to presume otherwise. But some folks are just unwilling to compromise, and if you don't, precisely mirror my opinion, then you must be in support of the exact extreme opposite of it, and that's simply not the case.
yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, my internet connection kind of just went out, and it came back on during all brown people are terrorists. I was very
Yeah, of course. That's what I was saying. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, it's tough. Like, as someone who spends way too much time on the internet and way too much time on social media, it gets tough to kind of parse like what people want from from social media accounts
Mm-hmm.
and what realistically is happening in pop culture. And like, I'm not telling anyone who's listening who's within earshots of the podcast they shouldn't take strong political stances. Go for it. I just think that expecting a like multi-billion-dollar corporate enterprise to reflect your politics is that's just probably not a reasonable thing to shoot for.
And generally, I would say that you probably don't want to, I mean, what do I know? I am a Christian, so maybe y'all think that the Bible is fictional, but yeah, I mean, I think that you shouldn't inform your worldview, period, from fiction. Like it should be something from your own convictions, and that should be, you know, I don't know. I feel like some folks are like mad that movies and shows and stuff don't necessarily um give an outright moral,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not their job. They can tell stories, and the story can be yes, this person did the right thing and they got a happy ending, or they could do the right thing and not get a happy end. I mean, storytelling is just so vast and varied that you can't possibly expect the same sort of takeaway from every fictional thing that you take in.
Mm-hmm. No,
I,
you're right.
I'm just really interested in seeing how all this like comes into play because like they they are creating a lot of trouble for themselves.
Mhm.
Like and that's like
Mhm.
the Jew speak like like by including this character. Um so like I'm really interested to see how this story unfolds if it takes them to the Middle East, like why,
Yes,
how do
I that part I definitely don't think is happening. Like, so,
oh
it's the thing is like, so I watch a lot of spy stuff.
mhm.
Maybe not as much as some other people do, but when there's a lot of when there's spy stuff, they just kind of like run down the different countries and their different groups involved in the spy craft.
Mhm.
Like I fully expect this movie to indulge in that kind of spycraft and geopolitics of, there's Russian groups, there's Middle Eastern groups, there's Israeli groups, there's potentially, South American groups. You know what I mean? Like there's these different countries that have different agendas, and then there's a Captain America who's trying to like do the right thing in the face of what these other countries want to do. And I feel like that's about as deep as it's going to go. Um,
I'm really interested in hearing from you. Like, what do you think this? Besides that, like
mhm,
the leaders in the, like, what do
yeah.
you think? How do you think this movie will play?
So, so my theory, that I'm still trying to cultivate is that, in the comics there was, Organization Hammer,
Yeah.
which ended up becoming kind of like the replacement for Shield after Secret Invasion, after Shield was discredited, and the world was looking for like a new intelligence slash um, you know super powered
Face.
entity, like to sort of protect the world from whatever was happening. I think that that's a new world order part. I think that we're going to get the leader, and he's going to stand in for Norman Osborn as the like person who uh
Pulls the
is
strings.
what were you saying, Randy?
No, I was saying the person who pulls the strings.
Yeah, the person who pulls the strings. We know he's a genius. We assume, if we do the math, like the leader probably got his powers back in the time of the Incredible Hulk,
Yeah.
which would have been 15, 20 years ago at this point in the timeline of the universe, right?
Hmm.
Like must have been involved in machinations
Hmm.
over this time frame. And that means that if he, unless we find out through retcons that he was doing stuff in the other projects, he was probably involved on the international stage. So part of one of the things that they did in that movie was connect the super soldier serum to the Hulks. Whether it's Hulks or super soldiers, I could totally see the leader having a group and presenting himself and presenting his group as the new thing, the new entity that's going to protect the world where Shield could not.
What if the Hulks and super soldiers? What? Maybe they don't have to be different. Maybe they're like one and the same in that it's this new version of super soldiers, but they're Hulks. You see what I'm? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I think it would be weird to have Captain America fight a Hulk.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that it's more likely that those will be like two different things that he will have his hands into.
Mhm.
Because I still think that, I mean, spoiler alert for you guys that are listening to other podcasts, I think that he's going to play a role in the She-Hulk series. Um, I think that he's going to try to, if not successfully, but try to get Jen Walters' blood, for for more Hulks. But I do think that coming off of Secret Invasion and potentially coming off of Armor Wars, that whatever group was in charge before is going to be replaced by the group that the leader is running, and it's going to be multinational. It's
like
going to
like
involve other countries.
like sort of like an intelligentsia.
Yeah, intelligentsia, and
Intelligentsia.
yeah, and it's going to, you know, maybe take the place of Hammer.
I like that.
So I think that the super soldiers from different countries will be revealed to have been, and then maybe even the power broker, for all we know, what I mean, is going to be kind of tied into the leader and what the leader was doing.
You have Modoc coming in these movies in the
And
quantum like
mhm,
yeah.
yeah,
So I mean Modoc is typically on that roster. So
maybe.
maybe more I mean Modoc was introduced in a Captain America comic. So
Hmm.
I'm I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind more Modoc
I mean, I
in
personally
Captain.
think, I just personally think because it's Modus probably going to be an Ant-Man movie, which is going to tie into Kang,
Yeah,
that they'll
that
probably, like, unless they tie Kang to the intelligentsia, which I don't think they're going to do, except like
What,
super.
you don't think that Jonathan Majors looks good in a business suit? Like
I
he's
mean,
just like one of the people in the background that's like, oh yeah, he's just one of the supporting characters. Everybody is knowing that he's doing all whatever, but he just,
here's the
just
if we didn't know that it was going to be Jonathan Majors, then
uh-huh.
then yes. But because we know that it's Jonathan Majors, like, I think that I think that it's going to be harder to hide the ball that Kang is involved.
obviously they're not going to do this, but like throw in Victor Timely, that would kind of be fun.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like he's kind of done numerous different personas that it doesn't seem like it's something like outlandish that he would sort of be present at numerous integral sort of turning points in the Avengers history.
No, no, listen. Like I said, if we didn't know that it was Jonathan Majors,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think it would be a lot easier to slot him in there. But if we see someone that looks like Jonathan Majors, you're gonna be like, Leonardo like, so that's why I think that at least early on, it may connect down the line, but I think early on, I think they really want to, get the leader out there as a replacement for Norman Osborn. And
I will hazard my little guess right now. We're gonna get a regular looking, boring sort of person on this intelligentsia group. And then at the end of the movie, we're gonna see the little image inducer little effect, and the face is gonna be like, yeah, actually, it's Jonathan Majors.
Oh, you,
I'm calling that now. I'm
you
manifesting
know
that.
who that's gonna be? It's gonna be fucking Hayward from WandaVision. That's who that's gonna be. He did nothing. That's who it's gonna be. I'm telling you that right now.
That would please me
I
immensely. That
mean,
would please me
Hayward should be in prison though, if we're being honest.
immensely.
Hayward shot children. He's the worst.
Exactly,
Hayward
exactly.
might be the worst
Mm.
person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? I can't think of anything worse. He shot children.
But they're not real, guys. They're not real. um, but yeah, I mean, look, there's we mentioned before how much we loved the Secret Invasion trailer. We like the shows, the way that they're presenting these shows for the coming years, like injected into my veins. These seem
Hmm.
like really cool because they don't seem to be like superhero oriented. They seem to be like, storyline oriented.
Hmm.
And who knows who could pop up like in these storylines and what the ramifications might be. Um yeah, but that's the marvel of it all. You guys have any other stories that I might have missed before we strike off?
I have a story that I would like to take a break from for a little
Okay,
minute.
sure.
Um, I will mention it, and then hopefully it will remain only a mention. Uh, we got we got more news about Ezra Miller today. There was an article that
Oh,
dropped.
yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing about that article. I liked the article. I thought it was well written, but it was just a comprehensive summary of stuff that we had been hearing and had heard over the
Yeah.
course of the last year. So,
So I will
like, it's
absolutely
the it's the
say,
kind of thing that if someone says to you, Ezra Miller, what's that all about? Like, that's the story you share with
mhm,
them. But in
right.
terms of if you're like us and you've been, you know, consuming Ezra Miller content over the last 6 months, there's nothing new, really.
Yeah. I just I was sort of dreading. He was like, is this the last story on the docket? No, I think we got one more step. Like, oh, here it comes.
No,
Okay,
no,
fine. So
no, there's no need. I mean, look, this is gonna sound terrible, and I apologize to people who were like hardcore Ezra Miller, um, you know, people. But Ezra has issues.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah. But just because Ezra has issues, that doesn't mean that the way to address Ezra's issues is by canceling the movie.
Yeah.
We don't know if the law and if the court of public opinion, well, the court of public opinion is definitely like fairly against Ezra when it comes to social media. But like, you know, we can have we can definitely have a discussion about whether like Ezra is doing good in the world and whether Ezra will do good in the world. But I think that it's a little bit disingenuous to say that um canceling the Flash movie is something like justice because it isn't. It isn't, you know? Like whether or not they find help, get help, become a better person. Like that's separate. It's a separate issue from
Mhm.
whether the Flash movie comes out. And there are a lot of other people who worked on that movie that don't need to have their careers tied into some kind of retribution for Ezra.
Yeah.
Like it's already bad enough that the movie was supposed to come out like 2 years ago and it's still not out, you know? I don't know. I mean, I know that people want accountability, but I think the accountability is its own separate thing
I
rather
mean,
than
there's a lot of people who don't necessarily want the accountability and kind of just want the punishment of it all.
that too.
So I mean, like again, as we've sort of been reiterating, social media doesn't exactly let a lot of the nuance of that shine through. And again, I'm not one of these folks who tries to be too, who tries to um soft hand or sort of like pat on the wrist. The optic is clear. Have a white person getting sort of more graciously, like, oh, mental health treatment, we need to be, but yeah, that is a thing that needs to be happening here, and that's not really for the public to weigh in on.
Yeah. And look, if it turns out that the mental health aspect is some kind of like smokescreen,
Mm-hmm.
then by all means call it out. But I just sometimes feel like it's I just sometimes feel like that, like people aren't like, they don't care about the issues. If Ezra was not involved in the DC extended universe and wasn't playing the Flash, I'm not sure if people would be as invested in this story. That's just how I feel. Let me know if you guys feel differently.
I mean, it's absolutely a very easily I attention grabbing story. Because it's like just a lot of the allegations that are coming out is like, oh wow, and obviously that stuff is a lot of um clearly unhinged behavior and
Mm-hmm.
unhinged trains of thought. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it is tied to a a $1 billion company trying to make $1 billion movies about this really popular, really famous character, it ramps up the sort of tension and toxicity of it all that much further.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's gonna sound unsatisfying for a lot of people, but I do actually want Ezra to get help. I do want, if there are victims for those stories to come out and like come out in a way that's incontrovertible, and then for there to be accountability. I think
Yeah.
that, I think that in the meanwhile, we should kind of let those, like the people involved, do what they need to do to, to get to push those stories forward. I mean, one thing that came up in the Vanity Fair piece that we were talking about obliquely is that it sounds like there's a lot of settlements and NDAs being signed. So we might not know all the things that are going to happen. But if Ezra's truly as unhinged as people are saying they are, then that movie's not going to come out because something crazy is going to happen between now and then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if Ezra does get help, and in between now and June, if they keep their nose clean, then I don't know. I mean that.
And literally.
Yeah, exactly. Then it just comes back to, like, we're back in in fandom mode. Like, is the movie good? And by a lot of accounts, it is. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough because there are bigger things and more important things than fandom.
Yeah.
But I don't. It doesn't feel like yet we're being positioned to choosing between the two.
Hmm.
What do you think, Jared?
I mean, can I say that hasn't really already been said? Here, I'll keep this short.
Mhm.
Ezra, get help.
Yeah,
That's just Ezra, get help, please. Just get
yeah,
help.
yeah. I mean, and honestly, like it's tough because it feels like there are people who don't want Ezra to get help. It feels like there are people who are like, nah, Ezra should go to jail, even though even though it seems like there are a lot of like mental health issues at play.
Quotes and different like accounts of what all is going on is like this is clearly some not well behavior going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, as somebody who you witness current events and sort of try to thread the needle of like, is this person just doing something just because, or is there something, you know, we always sort of try to unravel what the motivation is behind somebody doing something criminal or doing something, immoral. And some folks do things because they just like doing bad stuff. And other people are not in touch with reality as they should be. We have to be able to understand the difference between the two. And yes, you can face some sort of not retribution, like you face some sort of, dang it, what is the word? Because my mind just blanked. But
No problem.
you you face restitution.
Okay. Yeah.
And you have to pay restitution and sort of pay your dues toward the people that you hurt. It's up to them whether or not they want to forgive you. If they do, how long it takes, blah blah blah. That is, you know it is something that's been brought to the public eye, but it's not really our place to try to say, that should be, how that should take place, the details of that. That's not for us to say. We're just able to kind of speculate and sort of weigh in without really knowing the full picture and without
Mm-hmm.
really knowing, the extent to which harm was done, the you know, whether or not, whatever the details of it are, we have to understand we are outsiders looking in. The law has to kind of be allowed to play out and assess the damage and all of that is sort of, you know for our end, it's just sort of, we're just chewing the fat talking about this stuff as, a pastime.
Yeah. And all that is to say that if you listeners and anyone, if you feel like in your heart of hearts that, you know, you just don't want to support this project and you don't want to support any projects that involve Ezra Miller, that is well within your rights. That is well within your, you know, in your conscience to say that, you got to draw a line. But just because you do that doesn't mean that, you know, whatever corporation or whatever fandom that has invested time, energy, and resources in this person and in wanting this person to um, grow and evolve, that they have the same orientation. And ultimately, like I said before, 9 months from now, when the movie comes out, there will be trailers, there will be marketing campaigns, and you will decide ultimately like what level that you want to support Ezra's endeavor. And no judgment if you decide that you want no parts of it. But part of why they pushed back the project is so that we don't have to think about it right now. Um, who knows the way we'll think about it 9 months from now? It's a weird tone to leave it at because normally we're a lighter show, guys. But I think that's where we should leave it before we move on. Like I said before, we're getting really close, guys. 2 weeks away before we kick off season 5 of the racial draft. I'm really looking forward to this season. I think there's going to be a lot of cool things happening. Randy, I don't know what your thoughts about the upcoming season. I know you're hyped, Jared, about the upcoming season. Um, but before we say our goodbyes, let the listeners know why they need to get hyped about the racial draft season 5. I'll start with you, Randy.
Because I have abandoned my previous my previous nicer disposition in terms of who I intend to draft. We're not doing the bidding thing. We're kind of doing something straightforward that I can more clearly map out my plans of sowing chaos and discord.
Randy,
So
this is a really awkward conversation, Randy, because I need you to take a step back and I need you to help the new faces.
help.
I need you to
Wow.
I need you to help the new faces of the Black delegation. Shout out to Steph and Angie of the Screen Sisters. I need you to guide them
Oh, okay,
to
fine. I will help them also learn how to sow discord and chaos by informing them of my most devious machinations. I will be the bad influence that they need to win. I feel like
Yes,
that's only fair.
yes. That is what I like to hear. Great, Jared.
Oh, yeah, like I'm in it. Be excited. It's your boy Jared's gonna be, and Sabra's gonna lead me to victory.
That is reason enough. If I wasn't sold before, I'm sold now.
Nice. This is awesome, guys. Thank you for joining me for these last couple hours. Listeners, thank you for listening along. I know, we have a different structure from week to week, but I hope you enjoyed. New listeners, I apologize, but we promise we'll do better next week.
Will we? Will we really?
Maybe not, but we do this thing. We're here every Sunday, well, every week, we'll say. We do this thing every week. We do the racial draft. Listeners, if you have your own perspectives that you'd like to bring to the table, always, we're here. Hit us up. Racial Draft Pod on Twitter, racial.draft on Instagram, Racial Draft on Facebook. You can hit me up at MTFIII. Randy, they can find you at where?
I'm on Twitter as well, Randy S0725, and I use the hashtag superpowerlist.
Jared, they can find you where?
On Twitter at Jared Kirsch _ that's Kirsch KIRSCH, and occasionally at you can find my writings occasionally at Murphy's Multiverse. I had to take a brief hiatus to actually make some friends for once at college, but
Yeah.
I'm hopefully back, kind of.
Yeah, and you can occasionally find my writing at Murphy's Multiverse as well. Shout out to our friends though at Agents of Fandom. We have a lot of cool people that you're going to be meeting over the next couple of weeks who write for them as well. Shout out to our friends at Fantasy Comics League. They're once again they're helping to help us and support us with respect to scoring comics and scoring these characters in comics. So hit them up. But like I said, we're always open to having guests. We're always open to discussing all the issues in and out of fandom, whether it regards the racial draft or whether it regards nerd news. But till next time, listeners, all things are possible.